Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. And he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Massachusetts. Now, you actually lead these tours and do these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this particular tour is also given by the Holyoke Heritage State Park staff, and so I tend to stress only the very old functions.
Okay, and so today, again, you're going to be educating us on the Holyoke Heritage State Park. So, tell us about the trains that once plied this area.
Yes, there was a city-owned train. Can you believe it? Who owns their own train? What city or town would do that? Well, Holyoke did that. They liked competition and they liked to get a profit out of what they had created. They were an industrial city. They noticed that the north to south trains that were there, the Boston and Maine, which was called the Connecticut River Line, sure, they had created spikes in towards all these mills, but Holyoke said, we can create our own train, and they did. It was called the Holyoke to Westfield train, and they needed a station both for passengers and for freight, and both the end of the train station and both of those were in the area of Holyoke Heritage State Park. And so you had the freight station being in the southernmost part of the park, and a freight station, they could drop things off, of course, like they need to, and deliver them in the mills. But since it's the end, and since there's no way to turn a train around, the individual cars don't have engines or any other function besides going forwards, but they don't have that engine. Only the engine and sometimes the caboose need to be turned around. And so you need to have a way of turning around a head car, the engine car, and a caboose. And what there was inside of this area, which is now Heritage State Park, was a turntable. The train engine would get onto it. It was a very, very powerful motor below it. It would turn it 180 degrees, and then the train would come off. And they would take some boost if needed. And so you reorient your engine into the right direction. There is no reverse on a train engine. There are brakes, but there's no reverse. So you have to do this. There were two of them in Holyoke. There was one by the freight station for the Connecticut River Line, and that's by the present-day Sullivan Scrap Metal. But there was also one position very close to where the carousel was, or now is, in the state park. Now, what else was in this park? There was the passenger train station, and that's pretty close to where the Children's Museum is now located. And so you'd have a place where the people can go in. This was one of two major passenger stations in Holyoke. There were two minor ones also by Riverside Station and by the northern part of Holyoke, which is called Smith's Ferry area. So that's a little bit about the train. I hope you read this whole stop because you'll learn a lot more.
Yeah, so why do you have a tour around the park?
Okay, I have a tour around the park, not only to explain the trains, and I try to avoid what tour interpreters do from the state park, because those rangers have their job inside the park. But I concentrate on what's outside the park, so I'll go around that C block and look at all the other things that are around there. And remember, this is the center of activity in Holyoke. The White Street is where the face or front of City Hall is. It was considered to be the most important street in Holyoke. And so you had the Opera House on this street, you had a lot of businesses and restaurants. On the top of the street, you had High Street, which would become the retail giant of Western Massachusetts. And
so quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or want to sign up for any of the various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. There he has both videos of the various stops along each tour, also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour or just have any other questions, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family, or for group parties, especially those special occasions, get-togethers. They're also good for just getting outdoors for the day. So now getting back to our interview, what is inside the park?
Okay, we've talked about the old-time historical elements inside the park, and we also talked about the outside perimeter of the park. What came next after the railroads, actually the railroads stayed there, what came next was the Skinner Mill number 2, took up the entire length of the park, but not the entire width. It took only about a third of the park's width, but it took up its whole length. Now, there was a fire inside that Skinner Mill in 1982, and when that happened, only the northern reaches of that mill were saved, and they converted that into the Volleyball Hall of Fame and the Children's Museum. And so those two buildings occupied the original Skinner Mill. Great system of doing this. Also, what to find the park? Along through the years, they also put in the Holyoke merry-go-round, which was born, I believe, 96 years ago. And its first location, of course, was Mountain Park in Holyoke. And they brought it down maybe about 30 years ago, and they put it in Holyoke Heritage State Park. And it's been very successful within that park. Also, they put inside that park the visitor center for the Holyoke Heritage State Park. And there, almost on a daily basis, they're open. And you can go inside there, and you can read about Holyoke's history, about fiber and paper production, and they also have special exhibits once in a while. This year, they're having, since it's the 150th anniversary of Holyoke as a city, they're going to have an art contest, which will be displayed inside of that visitor center.
Now, what does the future hold for this park?
Okay, about 30 years ago, about 10 Massachusetts Heritage State Parks were opened in communities around Massachusetts. Every one of them has been closed except for Holyoke and Lowell. And Lowell is a very small park because besides having a state park, they also have a national park there. So Holyoke's by far the most successful Heritage State Park, and it's only one or two left. All the others have closed because they didn't develop through the years. What Holyoke did was they got the merry-go-round, the Volleyball Hall of Fame, the Children's Museum to move in. It also became a small parking lot, and they developed like a water park there, and they put it right along the canal. When the canal in that area had a walkway, a brick walkway inside, so it's become a great place for people to come in during the day and just relax. And by looking what they needed, it's survived through the many years. Now I hope that it continues. I talked to a park ranger about 5 years ago, and he said probably no more buildings will come inside of it. But I think the way it will develop will be that people will have more and more exhibits within the park. They already have a lot. There also will be more walkways extended out of the park. And my great hope is that the four corners of this park will have places where you can walk through and designated historical trails and walk to the rest of the city, including one more brick walkway from this park, and also a lot more signage to help people understand what they're looking at within the park.
Okay, now, so thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and you can also thank you also listeners for tuning in, and you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website, holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.